for those of you who have participated in our prior conversations, you know that those are all accessible to you via our website. And we very much encourage for you to watch them, even if you haven't been able to attend them all. My name is Carrie Norton, and as I said, I am really beyond honored to be here today co-hosting this conversation with my two colleagues, Carolina Carvalho and Felicia Chavez. And we have been working as a little three-legged stool for about, I don't know, close to 2 years to see what might be possible in the systems world to collaborate, to break down silos, to decolonize, to lift up women's voices, and to see what might be possible if more of us systems curious and systems practitioners could work more effectively together to have impact in our respective systems and in our collective system. So we have been hosting this conversation series, and dare I say this is the apex of the series. At least I'll call it that. Hosting our beloved Joanna Macy and her colleague Molly Brown in conversation, and you'll hear a little bit more about them. I'm sure many of you are very familiar with Joanna's work. We have designed this series to honor the spirit and the work of Dana Meadows, Danella Meadows, who is no longer with us, but whose work lives on through a number of titles and publications and articles, in particular, Limits to Growth. And we started this series with Marta Cerroni of the Academy for Systems Change and continued it with Nora Macy, who talked about warm data. And then our last conversation was with Melanie Goodchild, who, among other things, is becoming known for her work in relational systems thinking. So in the spirit of honoring Dana's work, the 50th anniversary of Limits to Growth, as well as trying to spotlight women's voices in the field and lift them up for greater visibility, that is what brings us here to this culminating conversation today. And as I said, if you haven't introduced yourself in the chat, you're welcome to do so. Carolina, Felicia, and I are here to help anybody who needs help throughout this experience. We are recording for those of you who are just joining. And I would like to pass it along now to Carolina, who is going to introduce us to some breakout. But you'll be hearing a little bit more, as I said, about Joanna and her colleague, Molly, by way of introduction after the breakout session. So take it away, Carolina, and thank you all for being here again.
Okay, welcome everyone. I would just like to introduce our breakouts. We'll have 2 sessions with contrasting questions, just in paired breakouts. And the first one is just for you to meet our little system of system thinkers a little bit. So just arriving as yourself, very simple. Where are you coming from, and what is your relationship to system thinking? And please be kind to, you might meet people with a different level of exposure, so please be kind, keep this in mind, please. You'll have 4 minutes, so please enjoy meeting a fellow systems thinker.
Welcome back, everyone. We know the time passes very quickly, and so that's just how it goes. And now we're going to take you into the second of 2 breakouts in pairs. And the prompt here is actually one that many of you may be familiar with because it comes from Joanna, and I hope I do it justice. But the idea here is to imagine for 6 minutes with your breakout partner that there is an animal, plant, or element that wants to speak through you. And if your being was to speak to humanity today, what would it say? And so we want to invite you to take a moment as you enter into the breakout rooms to take about a moment to reflect, because this is going to require your imagination. And as you do that, once you're ready to share with your partner, again, just imagine that there's an animal, plant, or element that wants to speak through you in this moment. And if your being was to speak to humanity today, what would it say? So, Carolina, I invite you to.
Going to open the breakout rooms, and I'll just ask everyone. Sometimes it takes a little bit for your partner to arrive, so please wait for a few seconds before coming back, or it's harder to reassign. Okay, enjoy the breakout.
Welcome back, everyone. So I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the many partners that have collaborated with us in the System of Systems Change work. And I'll name them explicitly towards the end of today's session. And I invite you to notice who they are on our website. They're all listed on our website. And we're so grateful for their partnership. But now I'd like to just invite those of you who have done this either in pairs or independently to share in the chat any reflections that you have from this exercise that we just completed. And now I'm going to turn it over to Felicia to introduce our beloved guest.
Thank you, Carrie, and thanks to everybody for participating in our little getting to know you rounds. We try to do that just to kind of build some warmth and some interconnection at the outset of these large group sessions. So I'm very happy to introduce Joanna. Hello, Joanna. And Molly. Hi. So I'm gonna do the sort of standard thing here of reading the bio, but I think the bios have some useful little tidbits in them. So let me look for that information on my screen. So first off, Joanna Macy, Ph.D., is a teacher and author and a scholar of Buddhism, systems thinking, and deep ecology. As the root teacher of the work that reconnects, Macy has created a groundbreaking framework for personal and social change that brings a new way of seeing the world as our larger body. Her many books include Mutual Causality in Buddhism and General Systems Theory, The Dharma of Living Systems, World as Lover, World as Self, Widening Circles, a memoir, Active Hope, How to Face the Mess We're In with Unexpected Resilience and Creative Power, spring of 2022, and Coming Back to Life, the updated guide to the work that reconnects. Macy is retired and lives in Berkeley, California, and joannamacy.net is where you can learn more. And then I will move on to Molly Young Brown. And thank you, Molly, for joining Joanna and us today. MA and MDiv lives in Mount Shasta, California with her husband, Jim. And in her work as a writer, workshop facilitator, and life coach, Molly draws on the work that reconnects, eco-psychology, psychosynthesis, and systems thinking, and specializes in working with activists. She co-authored with Joanna Macy both editions of Coming Back to Life, 1998 and 2014, and edits an online journal, Deep Times, a journal of the work that reconnects. Her other publications include Growing Whole, Self-Realization for the Great Turning, Held in Love, Life Stories to Inspire Us Through Times of Change, co-editor Carolyn Treadway, and Lighting a Candle, Collected Reflections on a Spiritual Life. And her website is mollyyoungbrown.com. So those are our intros, and I'd like to invite Joanna and Macy to lead us, if you feel like it today, in our opening grounding exercise.
Yes, I would love to do that. And I will actually take it from this book of exercises, practices called Coming Back to Life. So it might be easier for me to just do it spontaneously. So we're breathing. We're in many places, dear sisters. We're at different stages of our lives. Some of us had to hurry to tune in, to be here, and now just rest for a moment. Just take it easy and tune to, you know what, let's do, close your eyes. Close your eyes and put your attention on the breath. Our world is breathing. Life breathes through us. Feel that. Sense the beautiful welcome in-breath, drawing it in through your noses, your nostrils, your trachea, into the lungs. Feel it kissing each cell awake, sparking the oxygen. And then the out-breath. That beautiful exhalation, the self-emptying, is a part of that beautiful letting go that's such an important part of learning anything. And with a fresh sense of encounter, breathe in again. And out. And as you put the blessing of attention on each breath, experience it. Can you experience it as being breathed? Attend to how you are being breathed by life. How the trees, the grasses, the algae in the oceans exhale their oxygen for us living critters of so many forms of the gift of metabolism, drawing energy. They're breathing out their carbon dioxide to us, their oxygen to us. And we draw it in this beautiful dance of reciprocity. And then we breathe out after each cell has been kissed awake. Breathe out the carbon dioxide. In this beautiful rhythm of reciprocity, nourishing at the heart of our life, of our planet. Sense the cunning interdependence, interexistence with all things. Give gratitude to the lessons that you've learned, that you keep in your intricate neurology, in your brain and the body of brain that extends through our whole system. And with that, we give thanks for being here with these sisters. How good that is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Of all the breathing exercises I've done, I don't think I've spent time with this being breathed perspective. So that helped me.
Yeah, right. And then you can extend it to being spoken through or being acted through. when you feel, give acknowledgement to all the teachers and inspirers that in your life.
Great point. So for those of you who don't know, in this series, we kind of organized it a little bit loosely, but approximately with the 6 speakers by systems thinking, systems being, and systems doing. And so thank you, Joanna and Molly, for being part of this systems being aspect. And so with that grounding exercise that we just experienced, Joanna, that's definitely in the line of this being and being a part of experience that we're trying to sort of play with and see into. So we did, of course, just so the participants know, we did meet ahead of time, the little planning group for this event, and had some conversations about what we might want to discuss today. But I just want to check in with you, both Joanna and Molly, to see, is there any particular topic that you'd like to begin with? Because if not, I do have some, but I know we talked about some things in our planning meeting, and just wanted to see if there's anything new and different that we maybe didn't talk about bubbling up, or if you just feel a particular impulse to begin with today.
Well, maybe Molly does, but I just need to say that we're in the present moment, and we're feeling our concerns are drawn to what's happening to the world around us, because it's being disrupted. And all that we've taken for granted before is in question now. So I'm certainly aware that living in the moment, as we try to do also, this is a time that we give thanks for our knowledge of systems to help keep us steady in a very disturbing time.
That's very much true. And something you just said reminded me of something, I can't remember if it was Carrie or Carolina mentioned earlier, but we are a mix on this call and in these sessions of people who are brand new to systems thinking, maybe haven't even heard about it until today, and people who have been in this world for a very long time, for decades even. And so if at any point Joanna or Molly or me or anybody uses any kind of jargon, or somebody you're in a partnership with that you're not familiar with, please be sure to ask for clarification of those terms that you might not be familiar with. And at the same time, we're, as much as possible, we want to do a deep dive. And so we will engage with jargon today. So in our pre-meeting, Joanna, I know that one of the things you really highlighted, if I remember correctly, was really this kind of connection between your Buddhist background and systems thinking. If you wouldn't mind just kind of giving our listeners a little bit of insight into how you personally made that connection initially, like what your introduction to the world of systems thinking was through Buddhism.
I had my answer to that prepared, but a new idea came to my mind this morning, is that the very fall that where I encountered systems thinking was 45 years ago, I think, or I was 45. That's about it. I'm 93 now. But when I encountered systems thinking, and it stunned me. But looking back today, I'm thinking that there were some very high Tibetan spiritual leaders, Rinpoches, that I met and I had known about, and they came and they gave me a blessing on my head and say, pay attention right now. There's something for you to learn. Those were not the exact words, but that was the way I took it. And that blessing put me out of commission I couldn't sleep for 3 weeks. But when I did dream intermittently, it was all visions of roots and trees and organic connections and circulatory systems. So I think that there was some connivance on the part of the world around me to have be brought to me from the point of view of these high Tibetan masters, systems theory that would be, they would recognize as exactly part of the reality that they have learned how to perceive.
Yeah, and I love that point you just made about the reality they have learned how to perceive, because I feel like all of us on this call, to some extent or the other, it's a reality that we're very slowly learning to perceive. And at the same time, it's you could say it's more native to us, like, and traditional education tends to kind of strip it out of you. But that learning to see in systems, I feel like, is like that's really, and it comes back to I actually have a quote I've marked from, I have the old version of World as Lover, World as Self, the original edition. And I just wanted to read this little bit that you read here, because I feel like it, or that you wrote here, because I feel like it kind of gives me anyway a sense of this starting place, where you said, "It has always been assumed as an integral part of human experience that the work of our hands and heads and hearts would live on through those who came after us, walking on the same earth beneath the same sky. Plagues, wars, and personal death have always taken place within the wider context, the assurance of continuity. Now we have lost the certainty that we will have a future. I believe that this loss, felt at some level of consciousness by everyone, regardless of political orientation, is the pivotal psychological reality of our time." And so, of course, I connect that to the work that you do and have done over time, this work that reconnects. And that, I mean, I personally really identify as an intellectual, academic this, academic that. And so for me, just reading that and then reading some of the material that Carolina, thank you, Carolina, had sent out ahead of time from you guys, it's that feeling piece that, systems thinking, systems theory, system, cybernetic, all this sort of stuff. I feel like we really get into that like thinky mode. And yeah.
We also mislead ourselves. We treat ourselves, and I know that because I was studying religion in my undergraduate life, and we treat ourselves as if we're brains on the end of a stick, whereas our body and neural system and subconscious, my God, is rich beyond compare.
And I could add something to that, which is the notion that these brains on a stick are the only intelligence in the world, as if somehow we came into being without any intelligence happening. I mean, I've looked at my hand and my God, the intelligence that goes into the creation of a hand and all it can do. It's intelligence is part of everything, and we tend not to think that. We think only humans are intelligent. Anyway, that's my association with what you just said.
Yeah, and to tie this in a little bit too to some of the material that you guys forwarded that we sent out, in terms of just again, sort of focusing in on that feeling part. This is from Coming Back to Life, chapter 3. Quote, "What we had been taught to dismiss as mere feelings are responses to our world, no less valid than rational constructs. Sensations, emotions, intuitions, concepts all condition each other, each a way of apprehending the relationships that weave our world." And then from World as Lover, this is the later edition, I think it's chapter 16, number 5 of this list is, "Open to flows of information from the larger system. Do not resist painful information about the condition of our world. Understand that your suffering for the world arises from connection and unblocks feedback necessary for the well-being of the whole." And again, for me, that really, like a light bulb kind of goes off with the work that reconnects that you've done for so long, Joanna.
And it was a doorway I began to share it when I realized that my grief over what we were doing in the Vietnam War was a form of intelligence. It was absolutely essential as a vehicle for my understanding of our collective existence on this planet. Or what a dear friend of mine, who was one of the few teaching Buddhists who could open to systems thinking then, he called it, his name was Thich Nhat Hanh from Vietnam, called it interbeing. And so what's beautiful is that we have access to non-linear thinking. We take in the actions and responses of other forms of communication and intelligence. And that otherwise we're like someone walking blindfolded through the world, guided only by their feelings of fear or belligerence. But we open our eyes, and I found that openness to suffering, the capacity of get over the embarrassment, because we're such a positive, connected, fearful of grief in our culture. But that grief and suffering have been a way to help people realize our systemic interconnectedness according to the work I've done over the last 50 years.
Mm.
Emotions as a form of intelligence. I mean, that is so mind-boggling, if you I mean, for people who are completely absorbed in their intellectual thought, the idea that emotions could be a form of intelligence is really revolutionary.
But it isn't hard to show them that these emotions guide our actions.
Nope.
So they're very dangerous. Yeah. So I just want to show, since we walked into the our introductions, the role of using our responses to the world as a way of understanding systems theory. This is a book that both Molly and Molly, who's hasn't been introduced yet by the eagerness of our program.
Oh, I was introduced.
Oh, good. We've written it together, and like some other things we've done, and and she'll be talking about the work that Reconnects, but and the spiral of our responses to the world. She'll be talking about, but how important it is to register an essential unrecognized feedback response, which is a pain for the world.
Yeah.
Okay, proceed.
Shall I talk about that?
Well, let's see what
Yeah.
Sure, that's great. Mm-hmm.
Well, the work that Reconnects is built on systems thinking. And it's not, I mean, we obviously talk about basic systems thinking concepts in the course of a workshop, but we also, the practices themselves are based on our understanding of living systems, so that people discover within themselves things they didn't even know they felt or thought, and realize their interconnectedness through the practices. So it's not just an idea that we say, you ought to feel interconnected, but the practices actually help people discover that within themselves. And we did in the little thing you just did with speaking, allowing a living being to speak through you. That's an example. it's real true. It's not just something you're making up. You actually can do that. You can actually channel, if you will, other living beings. And of course, you're translating it into whatever language you're speaking in human terms. So it's not pure, but there is, that source is within us. It's not just some imagination. And we discover that when we do the practices of the work that reconnects. And actually, after our talk, we're going to do some more breakout groups in which you'll have an opportunity to continue that exploration. And then we also actually present basic systems concept, usually kind of like halfway through the workshop. We don't start with that. We don't start by saying, this is what you're going to experience. We just invite people to the experience. And then afterwards, talk about feedback, talk about positive and negative feedback, self-regulation, self-organization, all these systems concepts. And I hope I'm not speaking jargon now, but I probably am, that help people understand their experience. And so after you have the experience, to have some concepts that help you understand it is very, very powerful.
I'm just curious, how long have you, Joanna, and you as well, Molly, been leading the Work That Reconnects workshops?
Well, let me say when they started. When did they start?
We didn't call them that back then. We called them despair and empowerment, and we called them deep ecology work. We didn't call it until I don't know when. Yeah.
Well, now we call it the spiral journey.
Yeah.
Or now we call it, but it has a structure very clearly, and from grounding us in our gratitude for life, so that we can, even if it's not the top of your mind, but that helps you relax into what your subconscious already knows, and that you belong, that you're here, and then that you're held by life in a very intricate web of interrelationships, or interbeing, as Thich Nhat Hanh calls it, or Buddha mind, as some be put in the Dharma, so that you are held in a world that interacts with you and all its beings, and that it's very active, and it's not inflicted on you from above. It generates with the help of our ancestors, and with the function of hope for those who come after us, and that here we are held in this living web, and that this is, and so we can feel grateful for that. Then we go around what we call the spiral, and we actually then find ways to help people share their pain for the world. It's the compassion, central role of compassion and you wake up to what, particularly in this culture, has been squelched. We don't think gives us impression of a successful, effective being if you say how you speak of your grief. But we're in sorrow for our world. Everyone I've met is. It's there. It's a deep ache, and sometimes an alarm. And then that puts us opens us to a sense of our interexistence with, and that is such an important discovery, particularly in a period in a country so built on the isolated individual, the autonomous, heroic, the autonomous hero, yeah. And that how deeply we belong, and that helps us to see with new eyes, and helps us to plan, or even think, or even be inspired by, oh boy, what I want to do, what I want to say, what wants to speak through me. And that is what we call going forth. So that's all I'm going to say at the moment. I should ring a little bell when it's time for one of our guides to ask us something.
That's great. Well, I wondered if you could say a little bit more, Joanna, because, again, these terms might be new to some of us, to some of our participants, in terms of, like, you mentioned interbeing, and then I know there's interdependent co-arising, and there's just these different terms that might be new to people. And so could you spend a little bit of time kind of unpacking some of that, or, illustrating with words?
Well, let me see. I think that in this country particularly, which is where I grew up and most of us are living, we're aware of this sense that we're self-made people, and that are looked at as a separate, success-oriented, effective, admirable, effective person. And this 5 centuries, say, particularly with the growth of capitalism, has put tremendous stress on our experiencing ourselves as a separate, autonomous self, and a basic aloneness. And what drew me particularly to the teachings of the Buddha was his recognition that we are not a separate self, we're a flow. We're a flow of experience. And that and this flow is deeply interwoven with our world and other people and other beings, and trees and rocks and water. And we come to our a recognition that after 500 years of the focus on particularly capitalism, with its stress on competition, this has had a huge effect on humanity, planet-wide, unfortunately. It has poisoned our relationships in a discernible way, and that we can missing out on so much of what gives us strength and effectiveness and joy when we're trapped in the isolated, competitive self that capitalism particularly is very good at growing. And so it's a liberation. I think that my love for systems and the Buddha Dharma grows out of the liberation I have felt as a thinking, warm-hearted, adventurous being who also likes to think and shoot her mouth off. Yeah. So that it was, and what's interesting is that the linear, I'm going to use that word, the linear mind frame of view, which is that in linear causality is deeply entrenched in this culture that is now a globalized culture, and that so that it's very hard for us to think that there is
Yeah.
So found systems thinking, far from being just ideas on the end of a stick, feeds my the warmth of my appetite for understanding and loving people.
Yeah, and what you just said makes me think of, it's like systems thinking in service to this larger caring or perception of experience of the interdependence.
Yes,
rather than something else.
That's right. So you can see why Thich Nhat Hanh he's very popular in this country, so I mention him, but talks about interbeing. So that's really what the Buddha meant too, and that's what he's teaching. And so we are.
I want to make a gesture for interbeing. It's like two separate hands, but they interbe.
Yeah, and it sort of invokes the yin yang or some other kind of cyclical symbols when you do that, Molly.
Right.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Molly.
Well, you asked about mutual co-arising or some term like that, what it meant. And this is huge because it's getting away from linear. It's like this happens and then that causes that to happen and then that causes that to happen. And that's the way we tend to think and it's part of if you've got a problem, then find a solution, as if it was just a linear process. And it's not. Life is arising and co-arising all the time, so that you can't say this causes that because that also causes this. It's all co-arising. And that is such a really, really radically different way of thinking, of understanding what's happening in the world. So that instead of, I don't like the term goal, because to me, a goal is linear. Like I'm here and I want to go there and I'm going to get there, rather than letting something arise, letting like, oh, what's my prompting for today? What is it that I can do to serve life today? And just let that arise from within. I don't think it's actually from within. I think it's from outside, because it's our interconnectedness. And when we get quiet and meditate, we can allow that information to come into us, because we're not just blocking it out with our conscious thoughts all the time. Anyway, I went far afield there, but
par for the course. Well, and we're just, so for the participants who don't have a view of the agenda, I just want to let you know, in the next few minutes, we'll be wrapping up the sort of conversation portion with Joanna and Molly and myself, and then we'll have 15 minutes or so of 2 different rounds of a little bit more in-depth group practices, and then a Q&A. Where we'll come back together and share impressions and ask Joanna and Molly any questions, and then we'll wrap up at half an hour past. So Joanna, you are, as we've mentioned at the beginning, 93 years of age, and I just wanted to ask you, I just feel like you must have a very I don't know, unique or important particular perspective, given that you've lived this length of time and are a systems thinker and are a spiritual person and have this Buddhist background. Like, I just feel like that you really carry it. Certainly we're feeling that from the space of consciousness that you pass as you speak. But is there anything in particular that, with that foremost, that you could say out loud to us about that perspective that, we're not all gonna be fortunate enough to live that length of time. And so I just wonder what unique bits you might have from that perspective of 93 years.
What I have been feeling particularly in the now and in the most recent years is almost overwhelming gratitude. Gratitude that I had a human life. And it's not because humans are wiser or better, but because we can make choices. We have this self-weaving consciousness that allows us to the complexity that is required for choosing. And that's the first thing that a Dharma practitioner takes. I've been blessed with a human life. It doesn't mean you think that human lives are in any way better. They're sort of saddled with this, oh, I'm a separate person. Oh, I can do this and get away with it. I can just, but for me, it has been an incredible feast, like joyride of gratitude for, I would rather belong to almost any other country in the world than the United States of America. But there is something to be said, I suppose, for it's easier for me to get listened to as a woman, to progress, to be able to get some money, to be able to, so there's certain, and to have pity on my country. That's true. And so that's, I feel that I am a happy girl. And what makes me happy, I'm talking to you, is that women are walking on stage as systems thinkers. And that they even think of words like systems being and systems doing. There were so many guys there, scholars in Buddhism, that couldn't seem to understand the very notion that there's any thinking that isn't linear, or that habits are so deep. So I'm so glad among the things I'm glad for is that I was born with a vagina, and that I survived. I wasn't put out on the hillside, that I experienced denigration and prejudice and doors closed. And that's helped me understand suffering. And it also probably is why I'm shooting off my mouth so right now. At any rate, so I'm happy, than I've probably been any time in my life. And you're probably part of the reasons.
Wow, well, thank you so much for that. We should give Joanna and Molly and ourselves a hand. Thank you. Well, that brings us to the top of the hour. Goodness, we could certainly continue this conversation, and I'm sure most of us would sit right through the rest of our day, happy to sit right here listening and participating. And so right now we do have the opportunity to participate. So I'm going to hand the virtual mic, as it were, over to Carolina to introduce our round of breakout groups where we can hopefully deepen this conversation amongst ourselves.
Thank you, Felicia, and thank you so much, Joanna and Molly, for the wonderful sharings. So this time we have a longer breakout to allow the discussion to go a little bit deeper, and we have two contrasting questions that I will send then to the breakouts. And one of them is, how has growing up in a linear or top-down thinking culture influenced my life? And then on the other hand, the contrasting question, how has the understanding of terms such as mutual causality, interbeing, and interdependency, which we've been discussing here with Joanna and Molly, how have they influenced my life in turn? So I'm going to drop them in the chat now. We'll have around 14-15 minutes, and I'll also send them these prompts to the breakout rooms. So please enjoy the conversation, and again, allow for a couple seconds of readjustment or people joining. Okay. I hope you enjoy your discussion.
Welcome back, everyone, and thank you for your patience with the breakout rooms. I know a number of you probably have things you want to share, and I see Arlene's hand is raised. But if you'll bear with me for just one moment, I want to acknowledge a couple of our leading partners, our collaborators in this effort. I would like to acknowledge Volans, which is a firm that's doing a lot of work in the UK and around the world in regeneration, among other things. We're very proud to be their partner. I'd like to acknowledge Hylea, which is a coaching company that supports the well-being of leaders with a specific focus on well-being. And I'd also like to, of course, acknowledge Systems Thinking Marin, which is led by Felicia, one of our very own here on this particular partnership. And if, again, you'll have an opportunity to register for our future events where you'll see many other wonderful partners who are modeling the very collaboration we are seeking to show that is possible in the space of systems thinking. So thank you all, and I see many of you here today. I know that there was a question that came up from Lynn, and so before we dive into some of you who have raised your hands, we thought Molly thought it might make sense to address and perhaps elaborate on this notion of going forth a little bit, and then we'll turn to your questions before we close. Molly?
Sure, I'll speak to it. Maybe Joanna will want to add something. Going forth is, moving into action, as Joanna was saying, feeling it, and it happens kind of almost automatically when we really see with new eyes, when we start to really grasp our interconnectedness and interdependence. We want to act on behalf of life and on behalf of the common good. I think somebody put something in chat about the common good not being part of a capitalistic system. And that is indeed the case, that we think about not just the common good for humans either, the common view for the whole web of life. And those promptings to action may take us very far afield from what we normally would be doing, or it may be something very, very simple and, just spending time with a neighbor who is lonely, or, it can be very, very simple, small acts, but it is moving in that sense of wanting to out of our love of life, out of our love for the planet and one another, that we want to act, and we want to, and it may be like a big project, or it may be simply a new way of interacting with our neighbors in the world. Do you want to add anything to that, Joanna?
No, it's very good.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Molly. I don't see Arlene's hand anymore. Arlene, do you still have a question? Or
I
comment to share?
actually I had a quick comment, and I wanted to have a quick response to Joanna Macy's comment about how she cries, and I wanted to thank her for sharing that, because I frequently wake up in the morning crying, and then I have to kind of check myself about that. So thank you for sharing that. That was so beautiful and so gracious and so empowering. So thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Arlene.
I could
Now
cry right now, but I won't.
You can. It's welcome here.
You're welcome.
Molly and Joanna, is there anything else you'd like to say about Arlene's comment, or I will move to Manuel?
About what, dear?
Arlene's share, or this comment about the crying.
Oh, no, go ahead.
Okay. All right, Manuel, you're welcome to share.
Yes. Hi, Theo. Hi, Joanna. Manuel here. Hi, Molly. Joanna, I was glad to hear you mention both the Buddhist tradition, but also the need to impact or influence capitalism, because my sense is that we need to work on both systems, or at least three systems: the culture, which you also spoke about, the self, but also capitalism, which is perhaps the most destructive system today. And so I wanted to acknowledge you bringing those into the conversation, because sometimes what I hear is people do either or. They're either working on the self, their own personal liberation, or they're trying to transform, they say, the social capitalist system. And I think we need a synthesis, a systems approach. That's it.
Right. You know, I received a comment the other day after I'm planning a series of conversations with a young climate coach who's 60 years younger than I, and we are going to be putting forth these conversations in a podcast through Sounds True. And they said, "Oh, you're talking about culture shift." And I said, yes, that's it. That our culture has been, can use a lot of wising up, or a lot of more accurate opportunities for people for expressing, sharing, and learning about the vast population of this planet, and about our more than human beings that are around us, and about the psychological dead ends we can fall into. So the conversation, yes, I think I'm glad for that term of what I'm headed for in the series that's coming up, a culture shift. We're all taking part in it. This very program of these women has a strong cultural impact.
Absolutely. I'm so glad. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I see that there are two more hands raised, and we only have 3 minutes left. So I'm going to invite you both to unmute yourselves and take a moment to share or pose a question, and then I'm going to move into some closing comments. So Claire and Poyom.
Yeah, thank you. I wanted to ask about, so thank you so much for everything that's been shared, and for the people who are helping to convene the conversation, and all of you who are contributing and listening. But I wanted to ask about grief. You know, I recognize the importance of it and expressing it. It's something that, frankly, as a man, I've struggled to relearn how to I thought I understood my emotions, and I had to learn that I'm not in touch with them the way that I thought I was. And I've been studying spirituality for most of my life. And something that I'm struck by is in Buddhism, you know, we're trying to, often in my study, it's like we're trying to transcend suffering. Or even in Hinduism or in certain other religions, we're trying to sort of transcend into something else or reach some other state that maybe it's not possible, or maybe it's being presented in a way that's misleading, because there's so much richness in the grief, and there's so much richness in accepting and being with suffering. So I just wondered if you could speak to that.
Thank you. Yes, your comment made me think of some of my favorite celestial bodhisattvas in the Mahayana. There's one that at 93, his name escapes me, but it'll come back, I hope. But he is said to have very keen senses, and he can hear the language of the birds, the beauty of their vocalizations, and be transported. And by the same token, he can hear the cries of anguish and agony from the deepest level of hell. We're opening ourselves to, if our world, our planet can survive what is being done to it now, and if they go off track with what is causing such danger and overwhelm, it'll be because we can do the moral equivalent of hearing his voice, that we can open our hearts. Our hearts have a basic systems understanding, I think. They have, yeah. Thank you for your question.
Beautiful. We are at time. I know, Claire, you want to just share something quickly?
Yes, very briefly. This is very much in support of systems thinking in Joanna's work and Molly, and thank you, Poyam, for what you just shared. Because of my concerns about the lack of understanding of our interdependence and being very much immersed in the sensory element of what that feels like to be a living system within living systems, I created a cosmology that might be of benefit. People can use it to show how the energy of interaction is occurring and how we are interconnected and how we are embedded within the planet and the consciousness of planet. So I'm just going to put the link in the chat in case someone can use it, because it's quite nice to have something that has visual references. So for the people who are less practiced in how to communicate to a more rational person, the aliveness of the planet and the universe. So it's very much available and needs to be used. So
Thank you so much, Claire. Thank you so much. Beautiful. So I know we're over time, and I want to thank you all for your patience, and especially for Molly and Joanna, the deepest gratitude from each of us here, especially those of us on the System of Systems Thinkers team, our little triumvirate. We cannot express in words really how grateful we are for your generosity today, and to all of you who came to be here in spirit with us as well and sit at Joanna and Molly's feet for this short time. And we invite you to, again, access our prior conversations and indeed to register for our upcoming conversations and for the interstitial event that will take place for an opportunity for further reflection on today's conversation on October 18th. We'll send you some information about that. We welcome you. And then our next conversation is on November 22nd. You'll be getting all of this registration information for those next conversations from us by way of follow-up. And we invite you to reach out to us if you have other questions or things you'd like to share. But I don't know if Molly and Joanna have anything they'd like to say in closing before we bid you all good day.
Just a question, you say that there will be a chance to continue in some way or hear something or some review on October 29th?
October 18th, we host what we call an interstitial, where we take into account the materials you sent us, Joanna, and this conversation, and we reflect on it in a slightly deeper way for those who want to go deeper, which of course you're welcome to join, but it's not a requirement. It's just to do, to deepen into your work.
Oh, well, and you'll let us know when that.
Yes, ma'am.
And
Yes,
a
of
reminder.
course.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
And I'll keep my mouth shut.
No, no.
Listen.
We would be honored. We would be honored. Molly, do you have anything you'd like to share by way of goodbyes?
Oh, gosh. I just am really, really enjoying this sea of faces, of new faces. I don't think I know anyone else here. And that's it's such a pleasure to know that there's all these wonderful people out there beyond the ones I know doing this work and bringing this culture shift that needs to happen.
Wonderful. Carolina, do you have anything that we need to know that I missed?
I don't think so. I just dropped in the chat the links for to register for the interstitial peer discussion and for our next conversation on permaculture with Lydia and Anne. And again, thank you everyone so much, obviously Joanna and Molly, and thank you to everyone who also joined and contributed, participated. This also wouldn't have been possible without you.
Goodbye, everyone.
You're
Bye,
welcome to
everyone.
unmute and say bye if you'd like.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so
Bye.
much.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you very much.